Hi everyone, it's Tammy Sherrill, and this next narrated, this next narrated PowerPoint is going to be on the introduction to research paradigms. Objectives are to be able to know that research is conducted from the point of view of several paradigms, that you're able to define paradigm, that you're able to define quantitative and qualitative as research paradigms, that you're able to identify which paradigm is appropriate for what types of research, and that you're able to differentiate between two sort of forms of reasoning or logic, inductive and deductive. And just dive into this whole concept of paradigms. So a paradigm is a particular way of thinking or viewing. It often impacts your perspective on how you see things, and it's the lens through which you view the world. So from a research perspective, depending which paradigm you may be more focused on or more attached to, is going to impact your way of thinking and viewing that particular research project. One way to think about these paradigms is that you just have different colored glasses on. So if I'm in the received or positivistic paradigm, I might be wearing my blue glasses when I'm in that paradigm. Whereas when I switch to the perceived or naturalistic paradigm, I'm wearing my red glasses. And there are actual research projects we're going to look at further in the course where these two paradigms are actually combined, and they're combined for a reason to be able to truly answer the research question. Looking at this continuum of research and methods, on the very, very bottom row, it's speaking to the approach to research. And so on the very, very right-hand side of this continuum, we see the perceived view. This is the naturalistic paradigm or the emic perspective. And this type of research, the very, very basic version of this seeks just to really explore. You might be just exploring a simple phenomenon. So phenomenology, the little bubble right above explore, is an example of research that simply aims to explore a concept or a phenomena. And that might be what it is like to grow up with ADHD, what it is like to be diagnosed with cancer, what it is like to manage your diabetes. So very fundamental. As we move along, we get to research that doesn't just explore, but starts to describe in more detail whatever it is they're investigating. And so types of research that we're going to explore in this course that fit with that description goal is ethnography, narrative inquiry. We're going to look at case study research. Moving along the continuum, we get to research that attempts to generate a theory. And the classic example of this is the grounded theory approach. And so here we've gone beyond exploring or describing, and we're actually going to try and produce some sort of theory in relation to our research question. And it might be a theory in the form of a model or a framework that you develop based on what you've discovered through your research question. So there was a really interesting grounded theory study done following street youth and their experiences in accessing healthcare. And out of that study, I think they interviewed 43 street youth, and they developed a theory about that experience and how that relates to healthcare professionals and what could contribute to a better experience for street youth. And then on the far left, as you're looking at the picture, is research that aims to explain, predict, might try and look at cause and effect. And this is true quantitative research, quantitative methods. And there's actually 3 types of quantitative research methodology that we'll look at a couple classes down the road. So moving from right to left, moving from the perceived to the received view, a variety of types of research traditions that fit with that certain particular research approaches. So we'll come back to this in subsequent classes. So just looking at defining quant and qual research as research paradigms. So on the left, the quantitative research. This is a very systematic, empirical investigation of obviously observable phenomena where we need to be able to observe and see change and measure that in some way. And so typically it's via some statistical, mathematical, or some kind of computational technique. So with quant research, we use numbers or statistics to quantify or measure and to describe empirical data. So this approach uses actually deductive logic, which we're going to look at in a minute. So we gather data about our particular question and attempt to, quantify or measure that data or that answer to that question. On the right-hand side here is the qualitative research domain, and qualitative research is a very thoughtful, systematic investigation of a human experience. And it's via interpretive approaches. So a variety of different ways that we gather data, but we're really gathering words and descriptions to understand a phenomena of human experience. And this uses inductive logic, which we're going to look at shortly. So let's look a little bit more at the received view, the positivistic view, or the quantitative domain. So some of the values, beliefs, or principles under quantitative research is it uses a scientific method. It uses scientific ways of thinking and inquiry to answer a particular research question. We use, as was previously mentioned, statistical explanations. Is there a statistical difference between the control group and the experimental group? And we're really looking for prediction. We often are testing a question and we want to be able to approve the results of that question, and we're often looking for cause and effect. For sure, specifically with a randomized controlled trial or a clinical trial, we're looking, when we do A, does B happen? So for testing a particular drug that has an impact on migraine headaches, what is, when patients take this drug, do they have an improvement in their migraine management, less intense side effects, duration, all those kinds of things. Pardon me. So sometimes we're testing and looking for cause and effect, but sometimes we're just looking for associations or relationships. So when A happens, is it possible that B happens? not cause and effect, but when A happens, we see more of B happening. So an example of this, I'm going to give you a child health example. A common strategy in children with asthma is to give the family a written asthma action plan. And so there's been some interesting research looking for associations and relationships between children and families that have a written asthma action plan and their ability to manage asthma, have less ER visits, less hospital readmits, better control, more confidence, some of those things. So we're not proving cause and effect, but we're looking for an association. So we quantify our findings. Our findings are measurable. And often with quant research, we might start with a hypothesis. So we might predict, it's the researcher's best guess or prediction as to the outcomes. So we're going to look at hypotheses in a couple classes down the road, but generally, if we were looking at the situation with the written asthma action plan and children and families, we might have a hypothesis that there will be a difference between families and children who have one and those that don't. Or we might say family and children who have a written asthma action plan are going to have less hospital readmissions, less ER visits, less time missed from school, less illness, exacerbations, those kinds of things. Okay, qualitative research. So the perceived view or the naturalistic paradigm. And here in qualitative research, we place big value on the rich details of the context in which the phenomenon occurs. And so we're looking at the situation, the environmental context, and the rich details that come out of our data gathering. So time and place or context are important. So, when we move on in the course and start to look at generalizability of the findings, this is where, that's not always our aim in qualitative research because, time and place is important. So if we did a study in India versus the USA versus Northern Canada, it could be quite different. So our goal or our aim is to explore. So if you go back to that continuum and some of those bubbles along the bottom, we're looking to explore, to describe, and just to understand what this experience is like for individuals. So some of the questions, we're just trying to figure out what is going on here. And truth is really subjective. So subjectivism is valued, and truth is really determined by the individual or cultural group. And so, we come to accept that multiple realities exist, which is, quite different compared to the quantitative domain. There was an interesting study done. A woman did a phenomenological research study on the experience of having MS. And what she came to understand is that there is no one lived experience and that every individual has a different experience based on context and, a whole variety of other things. So we just accept that multiple realities could exist in qualitative research. So, how do we determine if we want to take a qualitative or quantitative approach? Well, certainly some people have their blue glasses on more than their red. Sometimes researchers get embedded in a certain domain or a paradigm. But the guiding principle, really, of all good research is to let the research question determine the research strategy rather than the other way around. So, investigating or studying something it might be more clear that qualitative or quantitative might answer that question best. And as I mentioned, sometimes in some studies, we will combine both methods. We're going to look at that almost at the end of this course. So let's look at the reasoning or logic behind these two particular paradigms. So let's begin with inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning moves from very specific to the more general. And so particular instances are observed, we look for patterns, and then we eventually combine them into some general statement or theory. So inductive reasoning utilized in qualitative research. So let's look at an example. So with qualitative research, the pictures here are actually of something we call kangaroo care, or it used to be termed kangaroo mother care, but as you can see from the pictures, dads can do kangaroo care as well. So it's basically skin to skin. And of course, my background is in premature babies, and we have come to know and understand the impact of kangaroo care on a whole variety of dimensions, not only how it affects the parent, but how it affects the baby as well. And so it was by simply observing, say, a mother providing kangaroo care, mothers providing kangaroo care, and we started to see a pattern. These mothers seem to be more confident. They seem to interact better with their baby. They seem less stressed. And so we might go on to develop a tentative hypothesis that by providing kangaroo mother care, it actually contributes to your maternal role attainment, or it reduces your stress, or it improves your confidence. And so that's an example of how just looking for patterns or observations through the gathering of qualitative research, we might be observing mothers doing kangaroo care, or we might interview mothers about that experience and go on to develop this tentative hypothesis or theory. So going from very specific details and patterns to more general theory. Okay, let's look at the opposite, deductive reasoning, and this moves from very, very general to the specific. So from a general premise theory to a particular situation or conclusion, and this is commonly used in quantitative research. So in the last bullet point there, deductive reasoning generally moves from a theory, the general thing about something, to the relationships between variables, the specifics that are found in that theory. Example. So we've developed a theory that mothers actually are less stressed and more confident if they are able to provide kangaroo mother care to their premature infant. So we come up with that theory, we develop a hypothesis, we gather data. So what kind of data would we be gathering? Well, we might use a reliable and valid tool that actually measures maternal stress or measures maternal confidence. And then we'll compare that, those results. And we might have a group of mothers that are allowed to do kangaroo care and a group that aren't, or choose not to do kangaroo care. And that's one of the studies we're going to look at subsequently to this. I'm going to give you another example. One of the things we've learned about kangaroo mother care is the impact on the baby. So babies often have better temperature regulation. They have better oxygen saturation levels. They often, their respiratory rate will stabilize during kangaroo mother care, and sometimes these babies even grow better. So, we could come up with a theory around that, and then we could gather data from all of those babies through our observation and gathering numbers, and then we could compare babies that had kangaroo mother care and babies that didn't, and see if we test our theory. So this table really is just, I love tables because I'm a visual learner and I like to put things in little boxes. So it just kind of compares and contrasts the difference between qual and quant research around the philosophy, the goal, the reasoning approach we use, our theory or our outputs, the measurement, how we gather data, our analysis, and then the role of the researcher. So in qualitative research, the researcher is much more embedded, may have more of a subjective view, whereas with quant, they're often outside looking in and would have a more objective view. So in our synchronous time together today, we are going to look at two different research studies, one qualitative and one quantitative on a similar topic, kangaroo mother care. And I have provided you just with the abstract of each of these articles. And what I want you to be able to do is to read through that abstract and be able to identify the things that are kind of jumping out or popping out for you around that type of research. So, if it's a qualitative study, what was their question? How did they gather their data? What were the results? What kind of language did they use in the abstract that might tell you that it's qualitative versus quantitative? And the same for the quantitative article as well. So those two abstracts are scanned and loaded on our Blackboard site. So you'll be able to look at those and work with a small breakout group to be able to kind of compare and contrast. All right, thanks everyone. Thanks for listening.